So I've been working on this dried piece of cherry, starting to make a spoon, a little teaspoon. And so I have the rough plank and outline, a little bit of the shape going on here. Now, I don't usually carve cherry this dry because cherry can get incredibly hard. A lot of fruit woods actually seem like they get just really, really rock hard. I've noticed that, and this one is no exception to it. Really nice grain. Still has a wonderful smell. I think that's one of the best things about cherries. I just love the smell, and if you actually eat with these, the taste is pretty good too, off of a cherry spoon. But I've been working with that, and so I processed a big piece of cherry down. I don't usually use a lot of modern tools, usually just a hatchet and a saw to process down from a log. And this is pretty much my primary whittling, carving axe, and it's not exactly equal on the bevels, but it's fairly close, and it's more of a right-handed bevel the way that I've sharpened this, we'll say. And so this I had to touch up a few times because it was a hard piece of cherry, like I said. I use Amora either 163 or 162, and this one is a double-sided, and I'm trying to remember which one this is. It's actually worn away. I've reprofiled it so many times, the spine is basically gone in the middle, which it actually works better. The more I use it and the more I sharpen it, the better this knife works overall. Rounded out those corners because that doesn't work very nice, but this is really great for making like teaspoon size bowls, especially. It's just the right size. Really like it, and a comfortable handle for the most part. And then I have this, but basically between two blades. So I have a Genesis here, LT-Right Genesis. This one's a Scandi. It's got black liners, and it's in 3V. And I know that's a little bit of a risk of a steel to work with really hard wood, but I actually like using 3V for that kind of thing. I think that there's enough toughness in that, and the way that I've done the edge. It is still a true Scandi, slightly modified by me, maybe on the angle a little bit, but it's not real chippy. I find that it has enough toughness that it does well, even in the cold. 3V does well. So this, I kind of do the primary work with, big work. And then I have here the Joker Avispa. And so the Avispa is a blade that I don't see a whole lot on. The text on the side here, it says Joka Avispa SBS9. Okay, and so that's by Jay Sabatier. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, Jay. I know you've commented on the channel a few times before on different Joker knives videos, so I'm just saying it like an American. You'll forgive me for that. Jay Sabatier. And cool blade. A couple videos talking about it briefly, but I've been using it for a lot of the detail work with this. Excuse me, my allergies are running wild right now. But this blade has a few things going for it, and a few things that are less desirable, but I'll just tell you what I really don't prefer, and then I'll get to the positives, because there's not many. First of all, it is a single pin and then a barrel through the tang for the lanyard. I wish that it had two pins. It seems like maybe one of these scales is a little loose. It's hard to say, but it seems like maybe it's just a little bit loose. The point at the end, instead of some thickness, I think that pointiness is unique. It's not uncomfortable, but it's unique. The thickness of the tang is a little more than I think it ought to be. At the very least, I would have liked to see it distal tapered, which is more work and more machining and more time and all that. The jimping is really aggressive. I don't prefer jimping at all. Okay, it seems like a lot, but these are actually kind of minor. This right here, I sanded this out a little bit because usually the guard has kind of a real point to it, and with my XL size hands, it was biting into my hand a little too much, so I just moved it up a little higher on that, and it's great. So other than a couple little nuanced differences that I would have with it, they're not deal breakers per se. It's actually pretty comfortable though. The walnut scales are really nice looking. It's very smooth, and other than that little bit of movement I sense in the scales there, it actually meets up well. It's got black liners, which is a nice look. It's affordable. The scales themselves are contoured nicely. There's really not any like sharp or hot spots in any of the wrong spots. And the spine is sharp enough that it works on most fire steels, not all of them. Came with a really nice sharp edge, and it touches up extremely easy. This is Sandvik 14, and so that's, if you know anything about blade steels, that's like the knife steel to sharpen up. It's so easy, touches up, and it's great for carving for that very reason. So some of the cuts that I do, like chest lever cuts, you know what? It takes a really nice bite. Remember, this is extremely hard wood, and you wouldn't really know it. I think the thickness also adds to the type of bite and the degree angle of those shoulders coming down together, and so it does bite into the wood pretty aggressively, maybe a little more than a lot of people want. Might be one concern for you. For me, I don't know, if you've had enough practice with blades, it's not a big deal after a while. So one of the things I like to do when I'm carving is just to level out the sides of my plank of wood and see how even it looks. This one has some really nice chatoyance in the wood, and the chatoyance is, if you've ever seen a piece of wood, it's going to be very hard to show you, especially from this distance, but there will be a type of like sparkling or kind of like gem quality to the wood, and that's called the chatoyance. It is a jeweler's word, but it's really pretty. It looks really nice, and this one has an excellent amount of it through the cross section there. But I like to even it out so that I know how asymmetrical I can make the spoon or not. It also helps me figure out which way the grain is going for different parts of the wood. You know, you can get a bend in it and the grain goes the wrong way and you could ruin your spoon or your project very quickly if you don't pay attention. Man, that's really nice. That's just awesome. And cherry does tend to have some really nice chatoyance typically. So only being, you know, right around a 3-inch blade, obviously it's enough to cover that full piece of wood, and there's enough handle to grab onto that I can get a pretty good purchase, start taking away material. But it's a small enough blade that it's really pretty wieldy. It's easy to get in there with controlled cuts, which is what you really want. When I start doing a design down here and shaping this, I can do it with big blades, and I've done it with a really big blade before, like a few times. I've done it with a short machete and carved spoons. So yeah, it's possible, but it's more likely to cut yourself or hurt yourself. It's uncomfortable, I guess. It's just really uncomfortable. It's nice to have something really small. And I'll say, even though this is, the Genesis is one of my favorite blades for like everything and anything, I don't want to overuse this blade in particular on these small pieces, because that's how much extra blade I have hanging out. If I can just show you, there is a considerable amount more. There's also more handle and more weight. And so this Joker Avispa is really nice because there's not as much there to work with. It's just easier to get in and do shaping. Small cuts, safer, all that. So I should talk about this sheath. This is not the sheath that the Joker Avispa comes with. This is an LT Wright sheath, or whoever's making this for him. I can't remember. I think JRE? Yeah, JRE Industries. This was an LT Wright sheath, and the Joker sheath, the one that the Joker knife comes in, is just not usable for me. It's absolutely inappropriate and inadequate. And so for a belted knife that I pretty often will wear, this is the proper kind of sheath. The one that the Joker comes with, I don't know. I think I repurposed it for something else. Just a point, if you don't have an extra sheath around, prepare to buy one, because this, if you don't get the Kydex version, and the original sheath is just garbage. So my opinion on that. All right, so there you have it. This is kind of the rough draft of the cherry spoon that I was working on, which I did with almost exclusively the Joker Avispa here, and it was very comfortable. I did touch it up a couple times with just stropping it. Obviously, you didn't have to sharpen it, but just stropping it, and with a really hard piece of wood, working with a knife for around 40 minutes, guys. Normally, that's going to give you some blisters. It wasn't too bad at all, actually. I actually thought it was pretty comfortable. I was surprised. Most of that has to do with the fact that there's no sharp spots on the handle itself. It's pretty well rounded, fairly ergonomic. It doesn't have a bunch of like strange finger grooves or anything silly like that. And not to mention, it is a Scandi grind. It digs in really nice to that material. The only thing that even got at me a little bit is when I would reinforce the cut, that jimping right here. It's a little too aggressive. Like I said, I don't want jimping on any knife anyways, but it's a little too aggressive, and so when I was bearing in, you know, that one spot of my thumb right there, it's a little sore, but not too bad. The rest of my hand was fine. It's a nice smooth handle, and I'm going to be able to finish this out. If the sun wasn't going down right now, I probably would just finish it right now and go ahead and do some Kohlrosing and some cool designs on here, some Swedish patterns, and go ahead and put a round ball at the top. But this gives me a lot of feedback about the knife, and overall I can say I think it's a nice knife. I think the criticisms are still fair. It's a little thicker than I want, but not much. It's not too bad. It's just a little thicker than I want. I think a lot of people won't even have that criticism. A lot of people, they're not going to care about the thickness. They'll think it's good. One easy way to deal with the thickness is if they had just brought up the grind height, I wouldn't even complain about the thickness of the blade. I think the grind height, if it had just been higher, if they brought that Scandi up higher, I would have preferred that, especially when you get towards the nose here, towards the tip. On the tip, which it's a really nice tip, it's an evenly ground tip. It's not ground, it's even more shallow, I'll say that. It's even more shallow right here, and I would have just appreciated, you know, about that grind height up here as well, an equal grind all the way front. That being said, it is a little bit of a stout, tougher knife, and that could be an advantage for a lot of people. But my thing is, to make a knife this tough and you know, the lower grind height, I would need 2 pins in here before I would use this really hard. I've used it to baton and split wood before, a little bit of prying, and I felt decently comfortable with it. I just know that 1 pin and 1 lanyard tube, it isn't enough. I may end up having to take these scales off in the future and rehandle it, just because I sense a small amount of movement in there. The other thing is that when I was bearing down in there, almost not at all, but that little spike on the handle, you know, if it had just been a normal flare thickness instead of coming down to this point, I think I would like that a little more. Although when I do this hold right here, it does fit into my XL size hands pretty well. And so when I was using this for like a chest lever, it wasn't too bad. It didn't really dig in. I just think it would have been more comfortable if there's more material there, just more to hold on to. That being said, you know, for a 3-inch blade, 3-inch handle, this is a really nice knife. I think if you're going to use it in more so lighter duty or whittling, kind of things you probably should do with a 3-inch knife, it's probably going to be great. And so I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with it. I think I'm going to keep using it actually to finish this out, and then I'll post a picture when I'm done. Maybe I'll use that for my thumbnail picture just so you get an idea of what I accomplished with this. But I like it, and so I'll tell you, Jay, it's a nice knife. I did have some criticism in there, but I don't think it's a piece of junk. I think it's really nice. Overall, the design is a cool design, definitely aesthetically cool, nice materials that were used. I just think there's a couple features in the way that I use a knife that I'd probably modify it myself if I was designing it, but I didn't. I bought it, and I'm still happy that I bought it. So that's what I have to say about it. If you have one of these, or you have thoughts about it, would you go ahead and comment down below? I'd love to hear what you have to say. Otherwise, stick around. I have a few more small knife comparisons I'm going to make, maybe against this Avispa.